Hey friend, I hope you're having a good weekend. I'm actually doing this on 4th of July weekend. So if you're watching it now, I hope you're having a good, restful, restorative, freedom kind of a weekend. If you're watching it later in the week, I hope you're having a good summer. Or if you're watching it later at some other time of year, I hope this season of your life is a good one. However, I always want to talk about stuff that, has got a little bit of mixture in there. And today I wanted to ask you a question. You look around, and in many ways, it feels like the world's out of control. Um, Not all the way, but in many ways, it feels like it's out of control. But I want to ask you, how are you doing? Are you out of control? Do you feel like you are reactive? Um, that things happen and you're in a reactive mode, whether that's conflict, you find yourself when you're in conflict, energy going up and you are just at it. That the stimulus of the conflict is getting a reaction out of you, or maybe you're reacting to news, the events of news, whether they're global or national or local. But when you hear it, you're finding yourself in a reactive mode, or to social media, to social anything. Could be gossip when you hear things on the internet or you hear things through whatever media, you find yourself reactive, making your decisions, your perspective, making your judgments. Um, do you find yourself reacting to the gossip? It could be within your extended family, it could be in your neighborhood, it could be that the neighbor did this, or somebody did this, or somebody in the church did this, or somebody at work did this. When you hear those things, you find yourself reactive and you find this kind of energy coming up in you that is you're kind of justifying your position and questioning theirs. Um, you find yourself reactive to traffic, or even sometimes reactive to traffic lights. You want to get somewhere and the light isn't turning at the speed you want to, and you feel things kind of rising in you. Could be family. Family is maybe one of the most reactive kind of environments in the planet, because God designed our families in a way that most of the people in our family are pretty different. I think of, like, my wife and I have four adult children, and the personalities of all four of them are completely different. And not only are they different, you put those next to us two, and they're different. There's six people, very different. And so with that, the way that our brains work, we we make decisions based on how we understand people, and we understand them based on all the data points that have come in. And out of that space, we make decisions and perspective judgments. And so when we are in a state of reactivity, family can really trigger us and send us off. One last area that could be one that creates a reactivity in you is just the whole arena of hype. Hype, whether it is big promises, whether that's ads, or even it can even be in faith that people say, if you do this, or you go to this church, or you do this thing, or you get in this training, it's going to be this. And there's this hype, and it creates this FOMO, fear of missing out kind of thing in you. And you feel, ha, 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 ha. See, when you're in that reactive state, there's a lot of energy going out from you. You can feel it. At first it comes up. It's kind of like it's adrenaline. It feels like it's coming up. You feel energized, but it's going out and it's depleting you. It's like what it creates is a lot of heat out of you, but not a lot of light, not a lot of truth, not a lot of benefit. There isn't really positive impact when we're living in a reactive state. It has an emotional toll, and it actually comes from emotional places in our life, often unresolved places. So a stimulus comes and we react because we don't have bandwidth, and we come out of like old news, old emotional response. So there's often a lot of emotion in it, and then it comes out as behavior. And so when we're in a reactive mode, it affects how we behave. And it could be that you're a person that powers up. And I have a tendency a little bit that way, that when I'm, kind of reactive or weakened state, I actually power up and try to power over. Some people go under or hide. All those things are emotional and behavioral. What I want to talk about, though, is we don't want to be reactive. That's the natural thing. That is what we see rampant everywhere around us. We want to instead be responsive. Now, this is not brand new news to you, but I want to think about it kind of deeply with you. To be responsive is when something happens, a stimulus happens, we want to respond appropriately. That takes a little bit of consideration. That doesn't just happen usually. So something occurs, something in our environment or something that we read or see, and we want to respond appropriately. We want to respond positively in ways that actually help the environment, ways that actually lift us up. So there's a positive response, and not only that, it's helpful. So that these things are not necessarily our natural bent. They could be, you might be somebody that if I help people, that will get me out of trouble. That's a reactive help. A responsive help is actually wanting to help that person. So there's appropriateness, there's a positivity to it, there is a helpfulness. It actually, a responsive posture um, is adaptive. It responds to different circumstances and situations. It pays attention. It's not so flurried that it just reacts. No, it takes time to adapt the response in a way that it now is appropriate and beneficial. It includes responsiveness, includes elements of empathy. And empathy is to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So you're aware, you're taking the time to become aware of what that other person or that group or that people group or that nation or that whatever kind of organization, taking the time to understand their perspective, what they think, what they feel. That's, related to kind of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you were them, that's what, that sentence would really end with, if you were them. Um, to do that, responsiveness requires us being alert, paying attention, being alert. We're reactive often when we're not alert. We're preoccupied. We got things going on. You think about when you might be reactive to your children. If you're reactive to them in a way that you're snapping or biting or controlling or getting angry, often it's because you're trying to do something else. Your mind is over here and they are getting in on what you're wanting to do, and you turn and snap. To be responsive is to be able to be present enough to be alert to what is actually going on, to be alert and aware. That's where we want to go. That's what we want to be like. We don't want to be in a reactive state. We want to be in a responsive state. So that's what I want to talk about. Um, Usually, to walk in a good responsive posture, it usually does require to slow down. The idea of, take a beat, take a few breaths. That idea of like count to 10. That's just a quip, but it actually relates to what's valuable. Let me just do a little crazy thought with you. Your breath, it's amazing. I was thinking today, there's so much wonder in life that we are only skimming the surface of what we understand really about anything, about health, about thinking, about spiritual things, about everything. We're just skimming the surface. But let's talk for a moment about like, why does your heart even beat? That's what I was thinking about this morning. I was praying a little bit and I thought, like, why does my heart, I don't even know what makes it beat. I know I can give the simple answer that God keeps me alive, and that's true. What is it that makes our dog that there's life? It's crazy. But my heart is beating, but I can't control my heartbeat. There's another thing that you're not controlling most of the time, and that's your breathing. But we actually have the ability to control our breath. And when we do, it has physiological uh, power in our body. It can change the environment. You'll notice sometimes people when they want to really power up, they'll breathe in to get themselves kind of oxygenated, ready to go. But you can also breathe slowly. And some athletes do that. It's funny, different athletes use different techniques. But you can breathe slowly and really exhale all the way and let your shoulders relax. Breathe in deeply, kind of make your body erect but yet relaxed, and breathe out slowly. You do that a few times, it changes your perception. You'll feel the release of that tension, that reactive energy. So often to be responsive is to take a little control of your physical perceptive capacity, and breathing is really a valuable way to start that. So it usually means to slow down, but not procrastinate. Sometimes people will, okay, I'm all right, I need to make a decision about that. I need to calm down. And then we get, if you're kind of a procrastinator at heart, when the tension isn't there, you don't do things. I know a lot of people who made it through school by cramming or make it through work by waiting for deadlines, and then they push hard, pull the deadline away, they can't do it. That's a kind of reactive kind of way of living. To be responsive is to lower that state, lower all that stuff, and be able to move ahead with an intentionality. So it when we do that, it increases the energy both in our lives, a healthy energy, but it also brings energy into the environment. When I'm relating in a way that's appropriate and positive and helpful, in a way that is adaptive and cares about others, the energy, whether I'm just one-on-one or with a group or in a large group, our energy, how we live, impacts the environment. So let's go a little deeper into the process. Let's say we do want to move from a reactive kind of living to a responsive living. Between stimulus and our response, there's a gap. And what I want to do is to help you to think about that gap and to increase that gap. Um, I'm trying to think of I've read so many things over the years. I can't think exactly where this concept came from. It's an important one. But that between response and between a stimulus and our response, that gap right there, as we build that or we expand that and we can enter in with intentionality, that then we are building what I'm going to say is our response ability. You have been given by God. You've been given by God authority and also accountability. You've been mandated to build your response ability. When you increase your ability to respond well rather than react, you are becoming a responsible person. And to do that, you are going to again take that kind of beat, but when you do it, there's a few things I want you to think about because you can't really just do it. You can. Here's one simple way. You take that stimulus and you're going to be responding, and your first simple thing is, what's the right thing to do? And that's good. I don't want to live in that space. I'll tell you why. Because that's really a legal space. That's really a space that just try harder, do the right thing. That's okay. It's not mature enough. It actually it doesn't have you in it. It doesn't have the other person in it. It's do the right thing. I want to encourage you more that for three things to think about. Between the stimulus and the response, you're pulling back and you're looking first, what's God's perspective of what's going on? What's his perspective if I'm having conflict with my wife? Lord, what what's your perspective of her? What's your perspective of this situation? I want to get clear, and in a sense, that's what's right, but it's right with a personal dimension. What does God want? The kingdom of God looks like God's perspective, God's presence, and God's power. That's part of what you want to fill the space between stimulus and response with God's perspective. Secondly, you want to clarify kind of who you are in the mix. This is why, for me, it's not enough to just do the right thing. You want to, you are the one, you're the agent in this situation. And so to do it well, you want to understand like who you are and what you bring to the table. What's your personality like? What's your personality like when you're tense? What's your personality like when you're calm or fearful? Understanding those things help you to navigate the situation and to become more aware of how you're doing, feeling, and how that's coloring your perspective. Now, it's interesting, I think like without having, you don't just, you can't pull all this off in just a moment. That's why, honestly, that's why I do my coaching program is to help people to understand and clarify their design and how they work and everything about them and where they've been placed and what does it look like to release God's blessing there and their sense of purpose. The reason I do all that is really for things like this, because I want to understand what God's perspective is, but want to understand myself. Who am I? What am I bringing to the table? What's my state? What's my sense of purpose and call? How does that come into play in this situation? So there's God's perspective, and there's the reality of what my purpose and how I'm rolling and how I'm doing in the moment. And then thirdly, it is taking into consideration the other person. I won't be able to do that if I don't create some space. I won't be able to do that if I'm in a reactive mode. If I'm in a reactive mode, you know who I'm thinking about? Solamente Tom. I'm only thinking about me. Usually it is to preserve myself. Even if it looks like I'm going after somebody, I'm going after to make myself safe. But if I'm aware of how I'm doing, and instead I want to understand that person or those people or that setting, now I have a sense of God's perspective, who I am, how it relates to my purpose and how I'm doing, and how it relates to benefit others. Now I am actually able to make a response. Does that make sense? I want to help you in this day because again, if you follow me, you'll notice that I continue to watch things kind of crumbling or bubbling, I'll say, all around us. And we have to learn to be a people who can actually move with intentionality according to our design, according to our placement, because God's put you where He's put you in order to release the good news, God's perspective, God's resources, God's help in right where you are, whether that's in your family or your community or your workspace or whatever. All that, understanding that space and your unique call in that space, and then your unique purpose, what you offer the world. So that's kind of what I coach people to understand. And I actually don't know any way that there's that you can gain that kind of ground as quickly as you can with what I do in I do a 5 day challenge. I call it Align Your Life 5 day challenge. Actually, I have one coming up very soon. And in those 5 days, 1 hour a day with me coaching and clarifying this with you, it's a workshop-ish kind of a thing where we're participating and you're working to clarify. You get to be able to clarify all that kind of stuff so that you can actually live a responsive life that has positive impact on others, creates energy for you. It actually brings kind of a healing to your soul in the process of that. So if you're interested in that, go to that URL, alignyourlifechallenge.com. Alignyourlifechallenge.com. The next one I'm doing is actually this Monday. So that, you want to hop on that if you want to do it. I'll do some more in the future, but that might be a benefit to you. My take home for you is that there's reactivity everywhere. You don't have to come into that. Even if your family is a very reactive family, even if that's what you were trained to be like your whole life, which most of us were. Instead, we can go counterculture with God's help to perceive his perspective, to understand who we are in the mix, to care about others, and to increase with intentionality that space between stimulus and response. So as you go with as a person who is responsive as God wants you to be. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.